G'day guys, I'm D-Mac from NBA Fantasy Bible, and along with me is Kayla Fonte, and together we are Between Two Hoops. Kayla, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing really well, just relaxed after such a hectic week in terms of NBA trade deadline. It's nice to be a little bit more relaxed, but I guess we're approaching or fast approaching fantasy playoffs. So yeah, it's been a massive week in the NBA once again, but shall we review?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go. Okay, starting with our ads and holds. I thought I'd switch it up just a little bit, but post-trade deadline, I thought there's been a lot of discussions, a lot of questions as well on Twitter in regards to ads, holds, a lot more movement to happen as well in terms of guys coming in and playing their first game and maybe guys coming back from injury. So I thought we'd go through this first and see what you think of this format. So starting off, I've spoken about this a few times on Twitter, but Buddy Hield, I think he is a must-add at this stage. Yes, DeAnthony Melton is to return. Nick Batum is to return. So there's a chance that Buddy Hield is relegated to the bench. But for now, I think he has to be owned.
100%. He's really just revitalized his career from with the Pacers too. So I think that's a big thing. But also, like you said, Melton's coming back, but he's probably going to be on a minutes restriction. He's not going to be just thrown right into it right away, which still gives Hield a little bit of a longer open window.
Yeah, and there's a chance that Buddy does retain his starting spot anyway once Melton and Batum do return. There's a chance that Tobias Harris moves to the 4, making way for maybe Buddy Hield to work alongside of Melton and Maxey. That is a small lineup, so perhaps they don't go that way, but I still think as a guy coming off the bench, he's got a lot of value, so he needs to be picked up. Next one's Trey Mann. He played his first game for the Hornets overnight. He looked quite good. He didn't play as much as I thought, but I guess first game, and he didn't have a huge role at OKC anyway. So it did look nice, and I think he is an ad, particularly if you need guard stats from a category league perspective. And from a points league perspective, I think he's got a little bit of upside there, Kayla.
Oh yeah, plenty of upside there. And it's promising if LaMelo Ball has a shutdown, which just paves the way for more opportunities, usage, production for him. So I would say take a flyer on him.
Absolutely. And I know I was a little bit surprised, but Micic alongside of him, backing him up at point guard, he looked quite good. He's on our watch list, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but both of those guys played quite well. Next one is another guy that was traded, Simone Fontecchio. So he's come into he actually came off the bench, but he's come in and played big minutes for Detroit. Came off the bench, looked really good. But having said that, there's still Isaiah Stewart to return to that lineup as well. Thoughts on Fontecchio?
Yeah, we still got to see how that lineup kind of shakes out too. Hopefully Asar Thompson keeps that starting role, but I wouldn't be surprised if they switch it up every so often. I think he's pretty promising right now. He played 32 minutes, I think around there, even coming off the bench. So lots of opportunities for him.
Absolutely. Next one's Asar. So we spoke about him at trade deadline. I think he was a bit of a winner, but yes, Fontecchio did look promising today. Asar still played really well tonight, but like we said, Isaiah Stewart is still to return to that team. So a little bit of a shake-up and see where this goes. But for now, I think Asar needs to be rostered.
I think so too, especially if he's in that starting role. And I'm hoping that we have flashes of his potential that he had earlier on in the season.
Yeah, it would make sense for the Detroit Pistons in terms of their youth. They've got to play the youth movement moving forward. So, yeah, that makes 100% sense to us. Maybe not for the guys at Detroit. But next one is Precious Achiuwa. This is more a replacement injury, but he's looked really good and he's continued on the right path. I guess now that Isaiah Hartenstein is sidelined, and we don't know exactly how long, hopefully that's days rather than weeks, but he's solidified his role. We've still got Julius Randle to return, OG Anunoby to return. So he, along with a couple of other Knicks that we'll speak about later, is playing really well.
Yeah, they're still dealing with 3 key injuries right now. So during that time, we're going to see Precious in a bigger role. He's not my favorite fantasy player, but I mean, if he's getting the minutes and he's giving you decent production, it just makes sense to roster him right now.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. He's got the opportunity. There's a lot of injuries in that front court. Yes, we had Bojan Bogdanovic debut overnight, but I think Precious Achiuwa is playing that big man role as well. I think Taj Gibson started overnight, but we know that he's just getting on now. So Precious Achiuwa is the guy to have here. Next one's Ben Simmons. He's probably more on the holds list, but I know that he was dropped in a lot of spots as well. But he looked really promising and nice all-round performance overnight.
Yeah, and he's still ramping up a little bit too. So we just got to be mindful of that. But yeah, he has looked really promising. And I'm intrigued to see what happens next. Hopefully not an injury.
Yeah, and Spencer Dinwiddie has moved away from that team, but Dennis Schroeder, nice segue, but Dennis Schroeder has moved into that spot, and he looked really good last night.
Yeah, he looked amazing. I think he's an ad right now. His value significantly rose from his time with the Raptors, where he was really buried into that bench role. So I would add and then kind of see what happens with the roster in the backcourt.
Absolutely. And we come to expect that Ben Simmons will probably miss games here and there anyway, even if it's just as a precautionary move, or he just gets injured. So that'll just definitely boost Dennis Schroeder's value even more. Malik Monk, he had a bit of a rough spell, but now he's really come back with a vengeance. He's played very well. I think he's a definite add.
Yeah, and he's very streaky too. But when he's on that hot streak, you just have to roster him.
Yeah, in a way, you see that his value is almost inversely proportional to a guy like Kevin Huerter. So he's sort of cooled off recently, whereas Malik Monk's sort of heated up. So I think right now, Kevin Huerter is probably on my possible drops list, and we'll get to that shortly, but Malik Monk definitely needs to be added. GG Jackson, I spoke about him earlier in the season. I think I got a little bit prematurely excited by him, but I saw the upside, and Memphis was playing a little bit of silly buggers with us. But GG Jackson's looked really solid in the last few games, and I think he needs to be added.
I think so too. And as long as he's getting big minutes, there's so much potential for him. And like you said, early on in the season, we had that upside. It's just he wasn't receiving the minutes to do enough. But now if that opens the way for him, add him.
Yeah, I think so too. I've got a list of holds there. Paul Reed, we got a lot of questions around him. He had a couple of quiet games. He was playing ill. He had some illness. He's come back and he's looked really solid. So I think he needs to be held at this stage. He's more valuable in a category league rather than a points league. But I think, Kayla, I think he could still have value in a points league.
I think he's still decent. The main thing for me is just that he has that long-term value right now. So it makes sense to at least hold on to him and see how everything shakes up. But he's still receiving pretty solid minutes, and he'll give you good production in a points league.
Yeah, absolutely right. We know that 6 to 8 weeks is probably the about timeline for Joel Embiid to return. So I think Paul Reed's got to solidify that role moving forward. Dan Gafford, he's another one that got moved at trade deadline. So he's moved across to the Dallas Mavericks. He looked really good, but he did start from the bench. Didn't play as many minutes as we would have liked, but he still looked really solid.
Yeah, I think we have to kind of wait and see how that lineup shakes out. Plus, Lively was also out, so we don't really know for sure how it's all going to work out with the center spot. But yeah, he looked really good in 17 minutes, almost a double-double, I believe. So some promise there.
Yeah, I think he's a solid hold. I know people are getting a little bit nervous, but I think he is a hold. And let's see what happens. He could start for Jason Kidd and the Mavs, even coming off the bench. And he's played this role off the bench in the past as well when he was at the Bulls, and even at Washington as well. So I think he still has some value. But again, he's probably more suited to category leagues at this stage. But I still think he needs to be held in points leagues as well. Mm-hmm. Kelly Oubre, this is again a replacement or an injury replacement type of move. With Embiid out, I think Kelly Oubre still has some value. But again, this is quite dependent on someone like DeAnthony Melton, Nico Batum, coming back to that lineup. Similar to Buddy Hield, but I think he's probably closer to a potential drop rather than Buddy Hield.
Yeah, most likely. For now, as long as he's receiving that increased usage, I would say hold on to him and then just kind of monitor what happens with all the injuries on the Sixers.
Absolutely. Jeremy Sohan, he's cooled off. He had a really hot streak, but yeah, quite recently he's cooled off sometime. But I think he still needs to be held.
I think so. I want to hold him for at least a little bit longer just to see. But I think that this is also a name that if you drop him, people aren't going to rush to go pick him up off the waivers. But I wouldn't do that yet. It's a bit premature, I think.
I think so too. And another name in a similar ilk is Ayo Dosunmu. He had that stretch that was really solid. We had that news about Levine out for the season. People rushed to go grab Ayo. He had a couple of quieter games, and then a lot of people were dropping. But he's come back, and his last couple have looked really solid. So I think if he hasn't been dropped, he's either a hold or he can be a nice add.
Yeah, I think he's a hold, especially with Levino. It just opens up more possibilities for him.
Yeah. Marvin Bagley is another guy that we thought was a trade deadline winner. He didn't move at the deadline, but he was still at Washington, but it was obviously Gafford that did make the move. So we thought, here we go. Marvin Bagley's going to get all of the center minutes, but he disappointed in the last game overnight.
Yeah, and he was coming back from an injury too. So that's the big thing, the minutes restriction. I wouldn't worry too much about it yet because I think he is still one of the biggest winners of the deadline. So I kind of want to hold and wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I've got a name underneath the watch list, Rashawn Holmes. I think he was available to play. I'm not sure why he didn't play,
Hmm.
um, but I would expect him to get some minutes as well. So let's see what the dynamic is between Bagley and Holmes moving forward. But for now, hold Bagley and let's just keep an eye out for Rashawn Holmes because we discussed it the other night on our trade deadline show that Holmes has been a fantasy darling in the past and people are aware of that. So let's see how those minutes shake out. Next one is Santi Aldama. We know that, like I said, a little bit of silly buggers with the Memphis Grizzlies, but I think he's got a solid role.
I think so too. He's not my number one on the Grizzlies. Like someone like Vince Williams would be that, but he's obviously pretty much rostered in most leagues.
Yeah,
Aldama would be next on the list though, just to watch and hold.
yeah, I think so too. These guys, it's clear. Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart, they've been added everywhere, but I guess some people are preempting perhaps a loss of value once all the guys return. Julius Randle, OG Anunoby, Bojan Bogdanovic will get up to speed as well. Alec Burks is another one there. So the Knicks have a great deal of depth now, which is great for their team and coming into the real life playoffs. But I guess it will possibly dent DiVincenzo and Hart's value.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I think it's a little too early to drop them just because, as we mentioned before, they're still dealing with like three key injuries. So they're going to continue to see those increased minutes. But once everyone's healthy, that's when we have to start making some decisions.
Yeah, and I think we'll speak about it shortly, but DiVincenzo is an absolute sell high. He's been a top 20 guy in the last fortnight. So I think you need to take advantage. Yeah, he's just been on an absolute tear recently. So yeah, take advantage while you can. And if you can, sell him off for some value there. I mentioned the watch list. Micic, we mentioned earlier, he looked really nice. Good, solid assist numbers. Good shooting as well, which is quite surprising. MVP in the Euro League in the past. So he's got some pedigree there. So let's just watch out and see how it all breaks down, particularly if, like you said, Kayla, with LaMelo Ball, unlikely to play a lot down the stretch, if at all. So I think Micic and, as we said, Trey Mann are the winners there. Kelly Olynyk, he played his first game for the Raptors overnight, and you'll probably have more of an opinion about this being a Raptors fan, but I think even though he was limited in his minutes, I think there's a pathway to some value there.
I think there's huge potential for Olynyk right now, and he might not be an absolute must add at the moment, but I would strongly consider adding him in most leagues. I think it's really promising, and I wouldn't even be surprised if he draws some starts at some point in the season.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So let's just monitor that situation. I spoke about Rashawn Holmes and Corey Kispert. He was on a tear, and I think he was a very popular ad earlier in the week, cooled off overnight. But I still just want to keep watching that situation there because as we get closer to the end of the season, maybe it's less minutes for the likes of my man Jordan Poole and perhaps Tyus Jones and some of the other guys there. So Corey Kispert is just another guy to look out for. He hasn't been playing huge minutes, but when he was playing those mid-20 minutes, he was shooting very well. And overnight, obviously, he regressed from that. But I still want to keep an eye out for him moving forward.
Agreed.
Drops. This is interesting. I sent out a poll the other day, and look, I utilized my fellowship to be able to make a move in my personal league. It was funny because one of my league members messaged me about that, saying I'm using you guys for poll decisions. But yeah, I was deciding between Klay Thompson and Buddy Hield before Hield went off in the last couple. I've dropped Klay Thompson, and I think overnight he just had another stinker. So I
He
think
did.
he is a drop.
I think so too. He's been incredibly inconsistent. I don't consider him a must roster player. Most likely in deeper leagues is where you could probably hold on to him, but I mean we're getting closer to the playoffs now, so you really have to think about your team.
Yeah, those minutes are trending down, which is really concerning. And I hope he does bounce back just for his sake as well, because he has looked quite disappointed. The team's doing really well, and Steph's bailed them out again, but Clay's just disappointing at the moment. So I think he's a drop. Zach Collins, I don't know why he's on here because we've spoken about him being a drop for quite some time, but a lot of people are hanging on for whatever reason, possibly thinking that Wemby might be shut down. I don't think that'll be the case. They've managed him really well throughout the season with reduced minutes, missing some back-to-backs, but now he's playing those back-to-backs. Zach Collins doesn't have that value.
Yeah, there's just no really fantasy upside there. I mean, someone to monitor if Wemby's out, but you don't have to hold on to him for that.
Exactly right. Harrison Barnes, I think he's on this list every single week, and I think I mentioned that every single week. So he's just a drop. No need to go into detail there. They are playing tomorrow, and it's only he's playing in one of 2 games, so he may be a nice streamer for that game. But apart from that, I don't think he needs to be rostered. Moving forward, Karis LeVert, since Darius Garland has returned, I don't think he needs to be rostered at all.
Yeah, I don't think so too. I was looking at his numbers the other day. Like in a points league, like he's decent where he'll give you like 25, 30 points, but it's really inconsistent and erratic. So it's just hard to justify holding on to him for long stretches of time.
I think so, and I think you'd do better streaming that spot in a points league, and it just doesn't even need to be thought about in a category league, unless, of course, one of Garland or Donovan Mitchell sit.
Yeah.
Duncan Robertson, it's getting crowded, so Miami obviously brought in some troops as well. Terry Rozier was brought in, so that's really limited Duncan Robinson's value.
Yeah, no point in holding on to him right now.
Yeah. Jaime Jaquez Jr. is another one in the same boat. He's looked slightly better than Duncan Robinson, but not much better. And I don't think he has to be held in standard leagues.
Yeah, agreed. And this one kind of hurts because we saw his potential with while Jimmy Butler was struggling with injuries and just his performances. Someone to monitor though with injuries, but you don't really have to hold him.
Yeah, I agree. Bruce Brown, I thought he was going to be in a nice situation at the Raptors, but it hasn't looked that way. He's played limited minutes. He just, I don't think he has to be held. As simple as that.
Yeah, agreed. I was kind of holding out some hope to monitor his situation after the trade deadline, but I think it actually, he got worse. So, yeah, droppable.
Yeah. Same goes for Gary Trent. I think we probably needed one more guy to be moved from that Raptors team, but Gary Trent, he doesn't have to be held. And we know that in category leagues, his value comes from threes, from steals, from points as well. And he's just not giving you that at a consistent level.
Yep, agreed.
Spencer Dinwiddie, he's now signed for the Lakers, which is great. And it's not surprising that he's done that. However, he's going to be playing backup to D'Lo. So I don't think in a standard league he needs to be rostered there.
Yeah, I don't think he'll provide enough value to justify being on a standard league roster.
I think when Gabe Vincent comes back, it's just going to get super messy as well. So, even more reason not to roster him in a standard league. Gordon Hayward, it's great that he's moved. I think he wasn't going to be played at the Hornets very much down the stretch anyway, but the move to OKC just means that he's not going to be able to provide that value that he was before the injury.
Yeah, agreed. And I think he's out for an additional 2 weeks. So it's really hard to just hold him right now. I don't think he's going to have enough value to have a roster spot.
Yeah, he won't play before the All-Star break, so perhaps after that he will, but I don't think he needs to be stashed throughout the All-Star break. Benedict Mathurin and Andrew Nembhard, I'll just put them in the same boat here, but easy drops for me from standard leagues. Whilst Halliburton was ramping up, I think Nembhard and particularly TJ McConnell were nice guys to have just because Halliburton was limited in what he could do. But now I think he played 30 minutes overnight. So I don't think Nembhard needs to be played. Mathurin really hasn't taken off, and we thought that perhaps there was a pathway for some value, but we knew that his fantasy game was quite limited, and it just hasn't worked out well for him.
Yeah, Nembhard has been the clear drop, especially with Halliburton ramping up, and he's getting those minutes up. But with Mathurin, it was very surprising because I think a lot of us expected that he would elevate his game now that Hield is gone, but that just hasn't been the case. And we've seen this earlier on in the season where he's been incredibly streaky. So I wouldn't hold him.
Yeah, good call. Markelle Fultz, there was a lot of promise coming back from injury, of course, but it's just very inconsistent. Jalen Suggs is still there. Cole Anthony's still there. So I think they're just taking a bit of value from each other. So I don't think Markelle Fultz just has to be rostered, and there's going to be times where he does miss some games as well. So for that fact, until he starts providing that solid value that we saw from him last season, I don't think he needs to be rostered at this stage.
Yeah, for me, he's more of a streamer than a hold.
Yep, agreed. Andre Drummond, he was looking good, and he was playing a few minutes alongside of Nikola Vucevic, which I think was more matchup based. They were playing some big teams, and therefore Andre Drummond was matching up with these guys and getting some nice numbers. Overnight, it wasn't the case, and we saw his limitations in terms of fantasy, but in terms of real life basketball as well. So I think he's a drop. And maybe when you look at a matchup against the Bulls where there is possibly a twin tower front court, maybe that's when you consider him as a stream. But apart from that, I just don't think he has to be held.
Yeah, I agree with that. As long as he's in that bench role, his fantasy upside is extremely limited. But if he's in that starting lineup, I think he's worth a flyer.
Yeah. Cam Whitmore was looking really good. Great scoring, really solid numbers for quite some time. But I think he's come back. And just because I won't say he's one-dimensional, not like our friend Cam Thomas, but he wasn't providing much more outside of scoring and decent percentages. But I don't think he has to be held at this stage.
I think so too. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he has an ankle injury right now or some kind of injury.
Right. I need to check that. I need to check that. But if that's the case, yeah, they're clear drop. And I guess Tari Easton has been out all this time as well. So I would expect him to come back shortly, perhaps before All-Star break, probably after All-Star break. But if that's the case, then I think Cam Whitmore is better suited to deeper leagues.
Yeah, agreed.
DeAndre Hunter, he came back. He had one terrific game, and then he regressed back to the norm. So in that case, I don't think he has to be held. Any thoughts on that, Kayla?
Yeah, I would agree with you. It was surprising too because I know a lot of people held him through that injury, but I didn't really even see him as a must roster even before that. At the most, like a deeper league option. But yeah, drop.
And I think Sadiq Bey's actually been surprisingly very good, even with DeAndre Hunter back in that team. I thought Bey's value would come off, be taken away because of Hunter's return, but it hasn't looked that way at this stage. Very interesting. Obviously, Jalen Johnson is just an absolute beast at this stage. So, Bey is probably a hold. We didn't talk about him, but I think he's definitely a hold at this stage. And obviously, Jalen Johnson's a must-roster guy, a top 40 guy at this stage. I've got this term droops just because I made a typo when I was tweeting out earlier this week, and I got found out, and someone goes, geez, droops sounds a bit weird. But I'm going to go with this. Droops is someone heading towards a drop.
I like that.
So, well,
that's awesome.
I can't claim it as my own. It was a comment on one of my tweets, and I actually quite like that. If we want to move this into the midst of fantasy fandom, let's do it. But yeah, I've got a few droops here. Bojan Bogdanovic from the Knicks. I think we spoke about him. Very deep team now, and once everyone's back, like we said, with Randall to return, OG Anunoby to return, I don't think he's going to have standard lead value moving forward.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but yeah, unfortunately, I think you're right. He's definitely a droop heading towards that direction. Oh my God, that's so funny. But yeah, for now, let's just hold and see, but it's not looking good.
Yeah, another droop there I've got is Max Strus. He had a decent game overnight, but with all that talent on the Cavaliers, a lot of shooting talent as well, he doesn't have to be rostered in my mind, but he's one that could be held, and he's done really well this season, but I think he's heading towards a drop.
Yeah, and he was pretty good for the first half of the season, but he's dropped off quite a bit since then. I think at the most, like a deeper league option, but not someone I consider a must roster.
Yeah. Kevin Huerter, I've picked on him every single week, and probably unjustifiably sometimes. He has had hot stretches, but at the moment, I think he's just a little bit mid and probably heading towards a drop. We spoke about him being hot and then Malik Monk being cold, and now they've sort of swapped those roles quite recently. So I'm not going to drop him and go out and say you must drop this guy, but I also don't think he has to be rostered necessarily.
Yeah, and we talk about this every week. Yeah, it's like it's very streaky, right? Like you have to capitalize off it when they're hot, and then when they're cold, you just got to know when to let go.
I think so too. And something that was with Huerter's game last season, he was able to provide those assist numbers as well. But of course, when you've got someone like De'Aaron Fox who's really dominating the assists, of course, Domantas Sabonis is another guy that gets a lot of assists. There's not much left for Kevin Huerter at the end of the day. So it's really down to his shooting and some of his peripheral numbers. But yeah, I don't think he has to be rostered. You spoke about Derek Lively earlier. Dan Gafford's now in town. So I think that's going to really limit Derek Lively. And I think he's heading towards a drop in both category and points leagues, but not right now. Yeah,
not at the moment. Both of them are still a hold. It really depends on how they work out the center spot. Like, are they going to split the minutes? Is one going to have a little bit more than the other? I think some people were saying that Gafford was trending as the starter. But yeah, but we really have to just wait and see. But if that's the case, then I could see Lively being a drop.
I've seen conflicting reports. Some are saying that
Mhm.
Lively will continue being the starter, and some are saying that Gafford will. So let's see how that pans out. Maybe Kidd will alternate, which doesn't bode well for either of their value if they're splitting minutes. I'm not going to say that both are drops in standards, but it doesn't bode well for their value moving forward. Josh Giddey, this is an interesting one. This is just with my thoughts around Gordon Hayward. So Gordon
Mhm.
Hayward does facilitate. We've known what his game's been about, but does that impact Josh Giddey? And I probably should have some question marks next to him because I don't think necessarily he's a drop, but it's just definitely going to hurt him, I think.
I think so too. Him and Dort, I think, are going to take huge hits. But like you said, we really kind of have to see and wait how that all plays out. But I mean, it's not going to benefit him. That's the
No,
big
and he's
thing.
had a pretty disappointing season anyway. So
Yeah.
I won't say he's borderline, but well, yeah, he doesn't fill you with confidence
Mhm.
every single night that he gets out there. Another one I've got, this is real speculative, but I think it could tend, or it is a droop heading towards a drop possibly. And this is Russell Westbrook. He's looked really nice recently, but I guess now that Ivica Zubac has returned, that will impact Russell Westbrook's impact on the court. Probably will get less minutes because Zubac is on the court as well. And Zubac is ramping up. Zubac has come back, played the last couple of games, really limited in his minutes. So I think Westbrook has still had value there. But once
Mhm.
Zubac gets closer to, 28, maybe even 30 minutes, I think that will limit what Russ can do.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned this on an episode a few weeks back, but he's incredibly inconsistent too. Once their whole starting five is healthy, we
Yeah.
mentioned that he'll give you that one really good game, and then the rest are just stinkers. And you can't predict when that really good game is really going to happen. So
Yeah,
it's hard to
exactly.
hold him.
It's hard to hold. In terms of categories, just sometimes he's lacking with those efficiency numbers as well. Just those shooting percentages can be lacking at stages as well, which can hurt you. And if he's getting less usage, less minutes, and is poor with his efficiency, in terms of categories, I don't think he has to be held. So that's why he's on our Droops list. So let's see if Droops can catch on.
I think it will.
Injury updates. We spoke about Derek Lively. He's day to day with his nasal fracture. I think he'll come back very shortly, and we'll see how that plays out with him and Gafford. D'Anthony Melton, again, another one we spoke about. He could come back, start, which could impact, well, it will impact Hield. Whether or not it means that Hield is a drop or whether or not that means Melton is a drop, let's find out. But both of those guys are holds for now. Nick Batum, not necessarily a hold in standard leagues, but it's just something to monitor again, just with the starting lineup for the 76ers and just what that impact will be. Chris Paul, it seems like he's always about a week away with his fractured hand, and now he's gone past trade deadline. Obviously, he hasn't been traded, still with the Warriors. Let's see if he does come back. I'm guessing it'll be after All-Star break. It wouldn't make too much sense for him to be rushed back beforehand, but let's see how that plays out. Clint Capella, I think he's out for 1 to 2 weeks. So I think after All-Star break is when he will return. And we'll speak about this later, but that has definitely benefited on Yeka Okongwu.
He's looked really great so far. One of my
He's looked
stashes too.
fantastic.
But
It was one of your stashes,
yeah.
yeah. And I know definitely a great stash for points leagues. A lot of people had him in category leagues anyway, and he's just really rocketed up in the last fortnight.
Mhm.
Fred VanVleet, he's out for probably another week, and I guess with All-Star break as well. So 1 to 2 weeks is the timeline at this stage. Again, with a adductor strain for Houston, and that has just meant that Amen Thompson has stepped in and been a nice starter. Good stream whilst Fred VanVleet has been out. Patrick Williams, another 1 to 2 week timeline. I don't think he has to be rostered. He's always showing us a little bit of potential here and there, but not enough for him to consistently be contributing to your fantasy team in standard leagues. Got his foot injury. He'll come back in 1 to 2 weeks. I don't think that has too much of a fantasy impact, but it may take away a little bit of minutes from guys like maybe Alex Caruso, some of these guys that have been really performing quite well quite recently. But I don't think it has too much impact.
Yeah, agreed.
LaMelo Ball, again, we're not too sure on the timeline if indeed he actually does come back and play some games for the Hornets. Let's wait and see. But again, we spoke about Trey Mann. We spoke about Mitchich as well. So keep an eye out for that one. Mark Williams, we had an update a couple of days ago. He's going to be out for another month, which is very disappointing. And I'm guessing if I was them, I probably wouldn't play him for the rest of the season, which
Yeah,
bodes
agreed.
well for Nick Richards.
Yeah, I had a lot of people asking me too if he's a drop, and I think at this point I would just say yes, especially if you don't have that extra IL spot. You're
Oh,
just
absolutely.
yeah.
You're burning yourself. Yeah.
Mhm.
And even if he is sitting in your IR, it's fine. You can sit him there, but don't expect him to come back with top 50 numbers when he does return because it'll be
Mhm.
very restricted in terms of his minutes. I would not be holding.
Yeah.
OG for the Knicks, he's out for another 3 weeks, which again boosts the value of those guys that we spoke about earlier with DiVincenzo, with Hart, even Bojan Bogdanovic for the time being. But once he does return, it's going to make things interesting to see how those minutes shake out.
Mhm.
Same goes for Julius Randle. Exact same situation, same sort of timeline as well. Different injury, of course. But yeah, let's see how that all plays out. And we'll speak about our buy lows and sell highs at this stage. But I can tell you that Dante DiVincenzo is on our sell high. Desmond Bane, he's probably a month away with his ankle injury. Again, this is a situation where the Grizzlies won't rush him back too quickly. There's nothing to play for. Same goes for Marcus Smart. Same timeline. Again, nothing to play for. Do they even come back this season? Possibly for a game or two, but I don't think it's worth really worrying about them at this stage. Desmond Bane could be stashed in an IR, but again,
Mhm.
I wouldn't worry too much about hoping that he does come back and give you some fantasy value, even in the playoffs.
Yeah, agreed. I have him in my IL spot right now, and that's the only reason I'm not dropping him, just because I have that extra space there.
Yeah. And you just never know. Maybe he comes back for a game here and there and he'll look great and then
Mhm.
he'll sit the next few games as well. So it may be worth that IL if he does come back for that one awesome game. But let's wait and see. Jared Vanderbilt, we spoke about him last week. We weren't too sure of his timeline. It could have been season ending. It's looking like it won't necessarily be season ending, which will be good for the Lakers if they do get into the play-ins or the playoffs, because I think he is important to what they do. But for now, I don't think he's a fantasy guy at this stage.
Yeah.
We spoke about Joel Embiid, 6 to 8 weeks, probably best case with his meniscus injury. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But like we said, yeah, Paul Reed is the guy there. Zach
Mhm. And
LaVine's
then
out for the season. Yeah, go on. Sorry,
so I was
Kayla.
gonna say just Bamba in deeper leagues at the
In
most.
deeper
But
leagues, yeah, Mo Bamba there. Zach LaVine's out for the season. We know who's the beneficiaries there. Of course, Kobe White is one of our guys, but Caruso is another beneficiary, and Ayo Dosunmu in probably deeper leagues, but yeah, a bit of a nice streamer in standard leagues as well. And finally, Shaden Sharp, it's looking like he's going to be out for the rest of the season. We're not going to have that run that he had last season where he was, I think, he was a top 50 guy down the stretch. So yeah, it's going to be interesting for Portland. I think guys like Jeremy Grant, he wasn't moved at the deadline. Anthony Simons in and out of the lineup. Malcolm Brogdon, he's missing games as well. If it's true injuries, we're not too sure. They're not rushing these guys back. They're not going to play them humongous stretches of games. They're going to play them nice minutes, but these stretches of games, I don't think are going to be helping you come fantasy playoffs. So if you can sell them off, I would do that.
agreed.
Let's go to our sell highs. First one, Jimmy Butler. It seems like he's either on our sell high or our buy low. He's been awesome. It's not just the last 2 weeks, but since he's come back with a vengeance. He's looking his old self. If you look at his season ranking of 24, you'll be like, wow, what an amazing season. But I can recall so many times that we've had discussions around such a disappointing season that he's had. And in terms of categories, you're used to him being more closer to that first round value, closer to the 12th, maybe 15th. We know that he misses a lot of games, and this is why he's on our sell high, not just because of his numbers over the last 2 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks have been elevated, but for the chance that he does miss those games as we approach playoffs, where we would assume that the Heat do make the playoffs, but we would expect him to rest a few games here and there. So he is a sell high, but you look at those numbers across the last fortnight, unbelievable. He's back to his best. So for me, I don't necessarily need to deep dive into these numbers, but for me, he's a sell high.
Yeah, agreed. And this is what we've been waiting for, that sell high moment. And we've talked about it before where he has that potential to heat up in the second half of the season. And this is what we're seeing right now. And if you're worried about if he's going to be able to maintain this or injury issues, then now is the perfect time to sell high.
Absolutely. Next one's Nikola Vucevic. We mentioned him earlier in regards to Andre Drummond, but he's actually surprised me. He would have been in a lot of trade rumors come trade deadline, but he's put that all aside and he's been fantastic.
Yep, he's been amazing. And even if you look at those red numbers there, rebounds, assists, they're barely down. Like it's the exact same thing, but you've seen noticeable increases in a good chunk of his production. And yeah, sell high now.
Absolutely. I think the one that stands out there is blocks, and we know that he's
Yep.
not a big blocks guy from a center position. 1.9 is definitely elevated on his season average. So, yeah, that's elevated his ranking for this week or for the last 2 weeks. So I still think he's a nice sell high, but even if he can't execute that, he's still providing really nice value. And 43rd for the season definitely has surprised me because I thought he'd definitely be outside of the top 50 this year. I thought that the Bulls would lean into more of a stronger youth movement, perhaps looking at moving him out. But irrespective of that, he's been really good. So a nice mid-round pickup in terms of the draft. We spoke about Okongwu. Onyeka has been fantastic. And yes, that's been in the absence of Clint Capella, who I think, yeah, as we said, he'll probably be back after All-Star break. But Okongwu has definitely rolled with that since Capella has been out. The disappointing thing for managers that do have Okongwu on their team is Capella wasn't moved. And we thought that would probably happen this season. But irrespective of that, I think Capella, he's probably trending down. And I guess he's always had these injury concerns. And Okongwu is definitely trending up. So even when both of those guys will be available, I think Okongwu is definitely one to roster. He's always been one to roster in terms of category leagues, but in terms of points, I think he probably will be a rosterable guy rest of season.
Yeah, I agree with that. And even with Capella's injuries, we never really know what's going to happen with him. He's struggled with a lot of injuries throughout most of his season. So I think Okongwu will have a lot of other opportunities to be a sell high again. But now is a good time to capitalize off that.
Absolutely. We spoke about DiVincenzo. With the guys to return to the Knicks, now is the time to sell. And yes, you may want to enjoy this for the next 3 weeks until the other guys do return, and you'll do really well. But I think this is the time to sell just while he is super, super hot. He's white hot at the moment. Look at that ranking, 9-cat ranking of 13th in the last 2 weeks. Overall, 87th. That's been fantastic for him. And that was one of my worst moves that I did have him. And then I dropped him. I can't remember who I dropped him for. But I still think at this point in time, he's a sell high.
I think so too. And just look at those three numbers. 5
It's Steph Curry.
Yes.
Yeah, 5.3 is still threes per game is Steph Curry level. That's insane.
Right?
But across the board, it's pretty much all green except for turnovers. And that's just indicative of his escalated usage.
Yeah.
Which
That's not
you
even
see
like a
the usage rate.
huge.
It's not even a big deal. Yeah. And from someone who handles the ball a lot, 1.4 turnovers is nothing really. But yeah, amazing, amazing numbers. So sell high moment. DeMar DeRozan, again, another Chicago Bull, similar to Nikola Vucevic. He's put all trade rumors aside, and he's actually looked really fantastic in the last fortnight, but even across the season. You look at those numbers, 36th in 9-cat across the season. He has surprised me. 33rd in points leagues. Again, and quite a surprise to me.
Yeah, very surprising. I feel like he was a little bit worse than that, but I guess not with the rankings. But right now, with Levine being out, that really just solidified his role as the number one player on this team, and he has a lot of potential to even maybe possibly raise those averages a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Last one, DeAndre Ayton. There's a couple of reasons why he's a sell high. Obviously, you look at those numbers in the past fortnight, very much improved on what he's done across the season. But of course, as I mentioned with the Trailblazers, is this a time to sell them off before they start resting these guys for longer stretches? So himself, Anthony Simons, who else, Kayla? Possibly even Scoot. Probably
Scoot.
less so Scoot, but definitely these guys. Malcolm Brogdon is another candidate for some rested games as well. So in that sense, I think DeAndre Ayton is a sell high, or at least a sell. If you can get back a top 50 guy, I would do that.
Yeah, agreed. I think the past 2 games, he's been really dominant. He had a crazy double-double the last game. Dominating. I love that. He's been dominating. Yeah, now is a good time. Like you said, there's that possible shutdown risk. And I've heard a lot of reports about his behavior and his antics and things like that. So that's only a little bit more concerning. So sell high if you don't want to take that chance.
Absolutely. I think maybe the Suns dodge a bullet on that one, but I guess they didn't really dodge a bullet if they took him at number 1 all those years ago in front of all those other superstars like Luka. But anyway, we digress. In contrast, the buy lows. We spoke about Tyrese Halliburton last week. He's still a buy low, but last night he looked really nice. I think he played 30 minutes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you look at those numbers, and a lot of people do this. They'll look at the rankings over the last couple of weeks and go, 76th? I spent a first rounder on this guy. So this could be an opportunity where you can still buy low on Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah, I think this is the perfect opportunity, but that window is really closing now that he's really starting to ramp up. So if you were to buy low, now would be the time.
Now is the time. It probably would have been the time a week or two ago, but yeah, this is probably your last moment to do so. Next one's Darius Garland. I put him on here, but the more I think about it, maybe it's not a buy low. Maybe he's just going to be like this. I think he can improve a little bit. You look at those season numbers, 109th, which is really disappointing. I think in a lot of leagues he was taken maybe as high as 3rd round, probably more like 4th round. But 109th, yes, a lot of that is because of his high turnover rate. But it's just been disappointing all over. In the last 2 weeks, yes, he's come back from injury. He's ramping up. And I still think he is a bit of a buy low, but I wouldn't be expecting top 50 numbers come rest of season.
Yeah, I would still classify him as a buy low. But yeah, even looking at those rankings, I don't think he's going to go above that. He could probably improve his stats quite a bit at least, but not to what we were seeing before.
Yeah, and for me this season, it's the assist rate that's been quite disappointing. I guess Donovan Mitchell's really stepped up as that elite first, second rounder type of guy. It's more like a first rounder. His assist numbers have come up while Darius Garland just hasn't taken off like I thought he would, but still a young guy. In terms of dynasty value, still probably a top 20 guy. But for this season, I don't think it's going to be the season that we thought it was going to be. But like you said, still a buy low opportunity. Alperen Sengun, I think he did miss the last game. He missed yesterday's game. But the reason why he's on our buy low is just because, look at those rankings. 100th in 9cat in the last 2 weeks, whereas his season ranking is 50th. And then in points, it's not as bad, 43rd compared to 24th. And we can see some of the numbers are quite red. But the main thing there for category leagues is his free throw shooting. Yes, he can be quite iffy, but 66% compared to 71. Yeah, it's a bit of a dip, but everything else seems about the same. Maybe his points have come down a fair bit as well, and some of that could be just his worst shooting numbers as well. Yeah, it's a big change. You look at those categories, not a huge amount of change, but that ranking definitely has gone to 100th. That's really crazy.
Yeah, significantly dropped. We haven't seen it as much, like you mentioned, in points leagues, except for that one game where he had under 10 points and then only a couple rebounds here and there. So I think that really hurt him. He's still been somewhat decent for points leagues value, but still, it's a good buy low because we all know what he's capable of.
Yeah, 24th for points leagues across the season is insane. I was surprised when I looked that up. I'm not a points league extraordinaire like yourself, but 24th, crazy. But yeah. Baby Jokic, here we come. Tyler Hero, maybe it's just not going to happen. Now they've got Terry Rozier at Miami. Maybe it's just not going to be as good as it was earlier in the season, where he was an easy top 50 guy across the season, 83rd in 9cat, but in the last fortnight, 136th. That's really disappointing. Even in points leagues where you thought, shit, he'll be still doing really well. 95th across the last 2 weeks. Very disappointing.
Yeah, very. I think at this point, this is the kind of production that's here to stay. I don't really see him getting back to that pre-Rozier value that he had. He'll still give you a pretty good game here and there, but it's not enough. And yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, those minutes have really come down, as have the points. And like you said, Rozier, and you've got a plethora of offensive players as well, Duncan Robinson, Jaime Jaquez, to name a few. Yeah, he has been disappointing, and maybe it is here to stay. So perhaps we'll say it's a buy low in terms of his numbers, but maybe we would just expect this moving forward. So yeah, be cautious and don't throw crazy trade ideas in trying to acquire Tyler Hero. Just be cautious, just knowing that perhaps this is him rest of season. Bam Adebayo, I don't think this is him rest of season. 109th in the last 2 weeks, whereas season rank is 54th. And in points, now this is the one that surprised me, 71st in points, where he's 25th across the season. So where are we looking? It's points, big reduction in points, which has been disappointing. Slight reduction in terms of his rebounds, assists, and stocks. But overall, it's just really been his points. He's just not putting up as many shots as we're used to seeing. His usage has taken a dip. And I don't know if that's necessarily related to Terry Rozier being there, or if this is just a little bit of a finding out period just with those guys trying to gel.
Yeah, I think there's a number of factors at play here, but another thing that we have to keep in mind is that Jimmy Butler is playing extremely well right now. And I think that's a big reason for both Bam and Tyler Hero's drop off in production as well. But with Bam, I think these numbers aren't here to stay. I can see him getting back to what he was before.
Yeah, and from a category perspective, you look at that free throw number, we're used to seeing him closer to that 80% mark. Yes, he's been 77.3% across the season, but 66.7% with 2.5 free throw attempts per game is really down on his numbers. So yeah, you look at that category ranking in the last 2 weeks, some of that's down to his shooting efficiency at the stripe. And of course, some of it's down to just not putting up as many shots as we used to. And finally, Jalen Williams, we had him on our buy low last episode. He was coming back from injury, but since he's been back, he's actually been quite disappointing. 217th in 9K compared to his overall ranking of 52nd in points. Again, bit of a dip. 109th across the last 2 weeks compared to 67th. Kayla.
Yeah, pretty noticeable drop here. But like you said, it was the injury. He just came back, so ramping up a little bit. I think he'll probably increase this value. Nothing to get too worried about, but still a good buy low opportunity.
Yeah, it's really the steals. The steals have dropped off. And while he was on that hot stretch, he was putting up some crazy steal numbers like we saw at the back end of last season. And we thought, geez, this is going to carry on. But 0.3 steals over his last 2 weeks has been disappointing. But I think, yeah, that'll regress back to the norm where he'll be close to that top 50 guy rest of season. So, yeah, that's a nice buy low there. All right, week 17 schedule, Kayla. Obviously, we're going into All-Star weekend, so this will span across 2 weeks. So that's why some of the numbers look quite funny. You've got a 6-game fortnight. I'll say week. It's a match week, but it's a fortnight. But the Golden State Warriors. Any other observations out of this?
Yeah, one thing. I probably wouldn't stream anyone from Miami for just 3 games. Yeah, that's pretty disappointing. But there's a lot of potential streaming opportunities here, and we mentioned a lot of that in our ads section. So go check out that again. But yeah, make sure to conserve your ads too, because it is a longer week, so you don't want to blow it all on the first week, obviously this week. Just keep an eye out for that.
Absolutely. And I guess with a lot of moving parts, guys coming into their new teams, some injuries, some guys coming back from injuries, it's a good point. Let's conserve ads, not like we were for trade deadline, but just don't blow it all in the first week. But like you said, it's going to be hard to stream Miami Heat players. So that confirms what we were saying in regards to guys like Jaime Jaquez and Duncan Robinson would avoid if possible. All right.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap, Kayla. Any final words?
Honestly, main thing, conserve your ads. I think it's also a time when we're going to see how the rotations work out when the minutes are distributed. So that's definitely something to monitor with all the trade deadline acquisitions and moves.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And of course, you can find us on Twitter. So Kayla, give us your handle.
Yep, Kayla_Fonte.
And you can find me at NBA Fantasy Bible. Keep an eye out for us on Twitter. We're very active. Kayla has been very popular, as you are aware, and that's for good reason. So a lot of great insights from Kayla. So yeah, definitely look out for her on Twitter. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Kayla. Guys. And until next time, see you later.